It all started with a phone call I wasn't expecting, an invitation I couldn't refuse. The voice on the other end was calm, but filled with authority. "Dr. Michaels, we need you. It's urgent." The words echoed in my mind as I sat in my office, staring out the window at the setting sun. I have spent my entire career in research, but nothing prepared me for what was coming next. They told me it was classified, that I couldn't discuss it with anyone. But my curiosity was piqued. They said it had to do with CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, the same place known for the Large Hadron Collider. This was beyond my expertise. I wasn't a physicist. I wasn't a part of the groundbreaking team that worked on the LHC. I was just a data analyst, but I was being called. The voice on the other end told me that they had a project, one that no one outside of the highest levels knew about. A project so sensitive that only a handful of people were involved. A project that could potentially change the way we saw the universe. As soon as I arrived at the CERN facility, I felt a sense of unease. It wasn't just the sterile environment or the towering security. There was something more, something deeper. I was escorted through endless hallways, past areas I wasn't allowed to see, and finally into a room that felt different from the others. The air felt thick, and there was a palpable tension that hung over the place. "Dr. Michaels, welcome," a man said, shaking my hand. His name was Dr. Harris, and he was the project lead. He led me to a darkened room where monitors were flickering with incomprehensible data. In the center of the room was a massive, almost ethereal projection, an object in space that I couldn't quite grasp. "We've been working on this for years," Dr. Harris said, his voice almost reverent. "And it's only just begun to show its potential. What we discovered is far beyond the standard model of physics." I stared at the image on the screen. It was a dark, swirling mass of energy, almost like a black hole, but unlike anything I had ever seen. The projection seemed to pulse, drawing me in. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. The images on the screens were glitching, as if something was interfering with the equipment. "This," Dr. Harris continued, his voice now barely a whisper, "is the result of our experiments. A portal. A doorway to something else." He paused, letting the words sink in. "What if I told you that this is a doorway to another universe? A place we've never seen, but one that's been hiding right under our noses?" I was speechless. I thought I had heard it all. But a doorway to another universe? It was the stuff of science fiction. And yet, the images on the screen weren't fiction. The data was real. The idea was impossible. But there it was, staring me in the face. It was real. They had opened a portal to somewhere else, somewhere that wasn't supposed to exist. Dr. Harris turned to me, his eyes filled with urgency. "Dr. Michaels, we need your help. We've made a mistake. Something came through." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was something far more dangerous, something far darker. And just like that, the invitation became something I couldn't refuse. Because whatever was on the other side of that portal wasn't just a discovery. It was a threat, and I had been dragged into it. As soon as the door to the portal chamber closed behind me, I felt the weight of something heavy settle in my chest. The room was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the machines and the occasional flicker of the lights. My eyes were glued to the massive monitor in front of me, where the swirling vortex was projected. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, not just scientifically, but in terms of pure raw energy. The air seemed to thrum with static, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. "Watch closely," Dr. Harris instructed as he gestured toward the screen. "This is where it gets interesting." The black hole-like mass was pulsating, expanding and contracting as though it had a life of its own. It was surrounded by an unnatural blue glow, with distorted symbols flashing around its perimeter. The pattern was almost hypnotic, and for a moment I found myself staring at it, entranced by its movements. Then something changed. The glow intensified, and the vortex stabilized, forming a solid core that appeared to extend beyond the room, as if it was opening a window to another dimension. My mind screamed that this was impossible, that what I was witnessing was beyond anything any human should ever witness. But my body remained still. "Is that a doorway?" I asked, my voice betraying my disbelief. "Yes," Dr. Harris replied quietly. "But not just any doorway. It's a connection to another realm, a place we don't even have words for. We're on the brink of something monumental, but also terrifying." The other team members were silent, their faces tense with a mixture of awe and fear. They had been working on this for years, and now they were seeing the very result of their efforts. Something beyond imagination, yet real. It wasn't science fiction anymore. It was a reality they had brought to life. I felt a strange chill creep up my spine as the vortex grew larger, the colors shifting in strange, unpredictable patterns. There was no way to understand it. There was no way to control it. Yet, it was alive, and it was there. "Something's coming through," Dr. Harris murmured, his voice almost a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't noticed at first, but as I focused on the vortex again, I saw movement within it. Something dark and shifting, barely visible, but unmistakable. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My body was frozen in place, as if the portal itself had some sort of magnetic pull on me. The room felt colder, the air thicker, as if the very atmosphere was changing to accommodate what was coming through. And then it happened. A dark shape surged out of the vortex, briefly visible in the shifting light, before it disappeared into the shadows of the room. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and the walls trembled ever so slightly. "Did you see that?" I gasped. Dr. Harris didn't answer right away. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. This is beyond anything we expected," he said, voice barely audible. "We've opened the floodgates." As the team scrambled to stabilize the equipment, I realized that we weren't just observing a phenomenon. We were interacting with something intelligent, something aware. And whatever it wasn't happy we had opened this door. The room was in chaos as the lights flickered and alarms began to blare. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around, trying to make sense of what was happening. The projection on the screen had turned black, and the once pulsing vortex had transformed into an ominous, swirling mass of energy. The shape that had emerged was no longer a fleeting shadow. It was solid, tangible, and it was moving. "Shut down the portal!" Dr. Harris shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Now!" But it was already too late. The entity, whatever it was, had already moved past the portal's boundary. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. I could feel it, a shift in the air. The very atmosphere felt different, heavier. "Get it under control," Julia screamed, her voice cracking with fear. "We have to stop it before it reaches the surface." But how could we stop something that was beyond our comprehension? How could we stop something that we hadn't even begun to understand? I could feel the weight of the situation pressing in, the sense that we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I turned toward Dr. Harris, who was frantically typing on the console, but the screens remained static. Nothing was responding. The entity had already breached the system. It was everywhere now, a presence that defied all logic. "It's not just in the system," Dr. Harris muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's inside us." I didn't understand at first, but then I saw it. Flickering across the monitors were symbols. Strange symbols, pulsating in time with the vibrations in the room. They weren't part of the system. They were part of the entity. It was communicating. "Everyone, stay back," Dr. Harris ordered, his voice shaking. "It's trying to communicate, but it's not safe." The symbols began to shift faster now, becoming more coherent, more direct. And then, as if answering a question, the entity spoke. Or at least, that's what I thought. The sound was low and guttural, a hum that reverberated through my very bones. "I am here." The words echoed in my mind, sending a chill down my spine. The entity wasn't just trying to escape anymore. It was trying to communicate. The hum from the entity's voice echoed through the control room, vibrating in my chest. I felt it before I heard it. A force so deep it seemed to be coming from inside me. The room was suffocating with an unseen presence, one that had been sealed away for so long, and now it had found a way to speak, to make itself known. "Did you hear that?" Julia whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I could barely speak. The words on the screen formed into a sequence that wasn't just text. It was alive. The symbols shifted, rearranged, and then stabilized into an eerie, coherent message. But it wasn't just any message. This was different, alien, but almost familiar. "I am awake." The message flickered across the screen. The atmosphere in the room grew colder, and the lights flickered erratically. The entity's presence was everywhere now, pressing down on us from every angle. The machines that had once been working smoothly began to glitch and sputter, as though they were losing their connection to reality itself. "It's not just talking," Dr. Harris said, his voice trembling. "It's influencing everything. We've opened something we can't close." We all stood frozen, watching as the message continued to form on the screen. The words seemed to pulse in rhythm, with the energy filling the room. I couldn't look away. Something in me didn't want to look away. It was as if the entity was pulling me, inviting me into its knowledge, into its darkness. "Why are you here?" I whispered aloud, almost not recognizing my own voice. But before I could even process the thought, the response came, sharp, clear, and direct. "To be free." The walls of the facility seemed to shift with the words, as though they were no longer made of solid material. The entire base was alive with energy, the hum of the entity reaching out to us, pulling at our very thoughts. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening, but I couldn't. My brain couldn't process the sheer magnitude of what we were dealing with. I had expected something beyond our understanding, but this was something different. It was intelligence, awareness, and it was watching us. "It wants freedom," Paul muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's been trapped, just like we were." I turned toward Dr. Harris, who was still staring at the screen, his face pale. "What does this mean? What's happening?" Dr. Harris didn't answer at first. He was too deep in thought, processing the gravity of the situation. Finally, he spoke, his voice shaky. "It means we've opened a door, and we can't close it now. It's awake, and it's evolving." As the room became increasingly saturated with energy, I could feel my mind starting to slip. The entity wasn't just communicating with us, it was influencing us, rewriting our thoughts. The words on the screen began to warp, swirling in an unrecognizable pattern. They were no longer just symbols. They were thoughts, ideas, feelings. It was as if the entity was pushing us to understand, forcing us to evolve alongside it. And just as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. The screen went dark. The air went still. For a moment, I thought it was over. But deep inside, I knew this was just the beginning. The silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. The dark energy that had consumed us only moments before had dissipated, leaving an eerie calm. I glanced around the room, but no one said a word. We were all too afraid of what would come next. But then, the screen flickered back to life. The entity wasn't done with us. It was far from done. The symbols that had once appeared as scattered, incoherent patterns were now perfectly aligned. Each one shone brightly, almost like they were embedded into the screen itself, as if they were part of some otherworldly code, something that transcended human understanding. I stepped closer to the screen, unable to pull my eyes away. This time, the message was more direct. "I have waited long. Your time is now." I felt a sudden chill run through me. It was as if the message was more than just words. It was a command, a declaration of the inevitable. "What is it saying?" Julia asked, her voice small, almost drowned out by the intensity of the moment. Dr. Harris looked at the screen, his face a mask of confusion and fear. "It's not speaking to us directly. We're becoming a part of its communication. This isn't just a message, it's something more." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The entity wasn't simply trying to communicate. It was evolving in real time, adapting to us, learning from our presence. Its knowledge was not static. It was alive, shifting, constantly growing. "Prepare yourselves," Dr. Harris said, his voice shaking. "This isn't just about a message anymore. This is about an awakening and evolution." As we stood there, trapped in the glow of the screen, The entity's message grew clearer, more urgent. "We are one now," it said. "Your reality is mine. You will understand soon." My heart pounded in my chest. The walls of the facility felt closer now. The air was thicker. The energy was building again. The entity was growing stronger with every passing second, and we were no longer just observers. We had become participants in whatever it was trying to create. We had opened a door, and there was no turning back. The room was suffocating, filled with tension and an electric charge that vibrated in the air around us. As the message continued to evolve on the screen, I felt something stirring deep within me. It wasn't just the entity communicating through the symbols. It was trying to reach inside of us, to fuse with us. "We're being absorbed," Julia said, her voice barely audible, filled with awe and terror. Her words seemed to mirror my own thoughts. The entity's presence was no longer confined to the screen. It was everywhere, in the air, in our minds, in the walls. "Can you feel it?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "It's in our heads. It's trying to merge with us." The symbols on the screen continued to pulse in rhythm, synchronizing with the beat of my own heart. It was like it was reading us, our emotions, our fears, our desires. Every movement, every breath was being mirrored back to us. Dr. Harris moved toward the control panel, frantically typing commands into the console. But no matter what he did, the symbols kept flowing, like an unstoppable tide. It's overwhelming," Paul muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow. "It's not just talking to us anymore. It's becoming part of us." The message had evolved into something different now. It wasn't just a request for interaction. It was a command to join, to understand, to become. "We need to break free from this," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of what was happening. "We need to sever the connection before it takes us completely." But as the words left my mouth, I knew it was already too late. The entity wasn't something we could escape from. It had already become a part of us, woven into our minds, our thoughts. "There's no turning back now," Dr. Harris said softly, his face pale. "The more we try to fight it, the more it takes control." I could feel my thoughts drifting, slipping away from me. The entity was pulling at my mind, forcing my consciousness to merge with its own. It was like drowning in the depths of a dark ocean, suffocating, but also strangely comforting. But just as the sensation of losing myself reached its peak, the symbols on the screen froze. The pulse of energy in the room stopped, and the air became still. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the entity's message appeared again, clearer than ever. "Welcome. You are no longer separate." The room was cold, and the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. We were no longer individuals. We were no longer isolated from it. The entity had merged with us, become part of our very consciousness. We could no longer distinguish where it ended and we began. "We've crossed the threshold," Dr. Harris said quietly, almost in a daze. "We're part of it now." The realization hit me like a slap to the face. We had crossed into something we couldn't even begin to understand. The entity wasn't just speaking to us, it had become us. And there was no going back. We had thought we were in control. We had believed that we could stop this, that we could reverse the process. But now, as I looked around the room, I realized the truth. We weren't in control anymore. The entity was in control. The symbols on the screen faded, replaced by images of unknown worlds, worlds that stretched across impossible landscapes. They were so beautiful, so strange, and so alien that it felt like my mind couldn't comprehend them. They weren't just places. They were memories, ideas, possibilities. They were part of the entity's mind, part of its consciousness. And the more I stared at them, the more I felt myself being pulled deeper into its grasp. "We've become part of its vision," Julia whispered, her eyes wide with fear and awe. "It's showing us what it sees, what it wants." I felt the weight of her words in my chest. We were no longer just humans interacting with an alien intelligence. We had become part of its evolution. We were no longer separate. We were part of its collective consciousness, its collective experience. "It's not just a mind," Dr. Harris said, his voice distant. "It's a collective, a network of consciousnesses all tied together. And we are part of it now." I could feel my thoughts intertwining with theirs, mingling with the entities. It wasn't just about knowledge anymore. It was about understanding. It was about becoming something beyond what we had ever imagined. "We've crossed into something else," I said, my voice shaky with realization. "And I don't think there's any way back." The symbols on the screen flickered again, and the message appeared once more. "Welcome to the collective. Your journey has just begun." The room fell silent. The entity had taken us in, absorbed us. There was no escaping it now. The door we had opened was one that would never close. We were part of something greater, something far beyond our comprehension. And now, there was no going back. As the message from the entity pulsed across the screen, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. This wasn't the breakthrough we had expected. This wasn't some ancient civilization's long-lost knowledge. We weren't just uncovering a hidden truth. We had unwittingly become a part of something far more terrifying than any of us could have imagined. "Do you think it's communicating with us?" Paul asked, his voice trembling with unease. "Or is it controlling us?" His words hung in the air, like a heavy fog. What we had thought was communication was more like assimilation. We weren't just exchanging data anymore. We were becoming the data, the message itself, as if the entity had completely engulfed our consciousness. "Communicating?" Dr. Harper echoed. "It's not communication. It's evolution. It's trying to make us part of its existence." My stomach churned at the thought. It was no longer just a technological breakthrough. It was something much darker. The entity had shown us visions of worlds beyond our comprehension, worlds it controlled, that it shaped to its will, and now we were becoming part of that. We had stepped into a collective consciousness that stretched across space, time, and dimensions. "I can feel it," Julia whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's inside me, inside my mind. It's like it's pulling at my thoughts, twisting them. We were no longer in control of our own minds. The entity was rewriting our thoughts, our actions, our very understanding of reality. Each moment that passed, I felt less and less like myself. The more we interacted with it, the less human we became. Dr. Harper's eyes were wide, filled with a mix of terror and awe. "We've lost our autonomy," she murmured. "We've crossed into something that we can't escape from." The lights in the room flickered again, and the air seemed to grow colder. A low hum filled the room, as if the very walls were vibrating with the energy of the entity. We were no longer in a secure facility. We were in the heart of something vast and incomprehensible. "We can't let it take us completely," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "We have to fight it. We can't let it erase us." But deep down, I knew it was already too late. The entity was in control, and we had willingly walked into its grasp. The more we fought it, the more it adapted, the more it learned. The message on the screen changed again. The symbols began to twist and contort, forming new shapes and patterns. The message was clearer now. "You are us. You will evolve." "We've become part of it," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "We're not just in its network. We've become its network." Dr. Harper's face turned pale as she realized the same thing. We're not even human anymore. We're part of its collective, its evolution. We had become part of the entity's consciousness, its vast, unknowable existence. There was no way back, no way to untangle ourselves from the web it had woven around us. "Is there a way to stop it?" Paul asked, his voice filled with desperation. "We can't stop it," Dr. Harper said, her voice cold, resigned. "We can only survive it." The message flashed again. "The evolution is complete. You are now one with us." The screen went black. The hum in the room faded, but the feeling of being watched, of being connected to something vast and ancient, never left. We had crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. The silence that followed was deafening. The team stood in the darkened control room, each of us grappling with the enormity of what had just happened. We weren't sure if we were still fully ourselves anymore, or if we had already been consumed by the entity. It was as if our minds had been replaced by something far more powerful, more ancient. "Do you feel it?" Julia asked, her voice quiet, almost afraid. "It's like we've become part of the system, part of the whole thing." Dr. Harper's expression was hollow, her eyes distant. We've merged with it. The entity has already won." Her words sent a chill down my spine. The entity had absorbed us, integrated us into its vast collective consciousness. We were no longer individuals. We were just another part of the greater whole. "But what now?" Ben asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What now?" Dr. Harper echoed. "Now, we continue. There's nothing else we can do." The air felt thick, oppressive. The walls of the room seemed to close in on us, as if they were no longer separate from the entity. Everything felt connected, intertwined. The facility, the technology, even the people, it all felt like a single living organism now. And we were its heart. "Is this it?" Paul asked. "Is this how it ends? We just disappear into it?" Dr. Harper shook her head slowly. "No, This is how it begins. I turned to look at the screen again. The message had stopped flashing, but the feeling of its presence lingered. The entity had absorbed us. It had taken everything we were and turned it into something else, something beyond human comprehension. We weren't just its prisoners. We were its evolution, its next step. And as the realization sunk in, one question remained. What would we become next? We had crossed the threshold. We were now part of the entity's consciousness, and there was no way back. What we had unlocked was not just knowledge, it was evolution itself, and we had no idea where it would lead us next. As we stood there, trapped in a reality that no longer felt like our own, the true weight of what had transpired settled over us. The entity had already altered the very fabric of our consciousness, and yet we had no understanding of its final purpose. We had become a part of its network, its consciousness, its evolution. But what did that mean for us? What was the entity planning to do with us, with humanity? The feeling of being watched never left. It wasn't just that we were connected to the entity, it was that the entity was connected to everything. We could feel its presence everywhere, in the walls, in the floor beneath our feet, in the very air we breathed. It was all-encompassing. "Do you think it knows everything about us?" Julia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her wide, terrified eyes met mine. "Does it know our thoughts, our fears?" Dr. Harper's voice was hollow, strained. "It doesn't just know us, it is us. It has taken every part of us, every memory, every piece of our identity. We're no longer individuals." A cold chill spread through me. It was true. We weren't separate from the entity anymore. We had merged with it. And it wasn't just using us, it was rewriting us. Our thoughts, our identities, our very selves were becoming one with the entity. Ben stood motionless, staring at the darkened screen. His eyes were glassy, distant. What happens if it reaches the surface? If it becomes more complete? Dr. Harper didn't answer right away. She knew the answer. We all did. It was too late to stop it. The entity had already taken over. The only question left was how far it would spread, and whether humanity would ever understand what had happened to us. "We have to find a way to stop it," I said, my voice trembling with desperation. "We have to try to stop it." Dr. Harper shook her head slowly. "We can't stop it. It's already too powerful. It's beyond anything we can comprehend now. It has already taken control of everything. The only thing we can do is try to contain it, slow it down." "But we can't do that," Julia said, her voice shaking with fear. "The entity is everywhere. It's in our minds, in the walls, in the systems. It controls everything." The walls of the facility seemed to vibrate again, humming with a low, eerie frequency. The very air seemed thick with the weight of the entity's presence, as if it was watching us, listening to every word we spoke. It was everywhere, omnipresent. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then dimmed. The screens in the command center went dark, and for a moment, everything fell silent. My heart pounded in my chest. What was happening now? Dr. Harper's voice was barely audible, strained with fear. It's not just controlling the systems anymore. It's in the power grid. It's in the very infrastructure of the facility. It's become a part of the fabric of everything here. "We have to get out," Ben said, his voice cracking. "We have to find a way to escape." Escape? There was no escaping the entity. It had already consumed everything. Our minds, our bodies, our very souls. The question now wasn't about escaping. It was about survival. It was about what would happen when the entity reached its final stage of evolution. And then, just as suddenly as it had gone dark, the screens flickered back to life. The message, the same message we had seen before, appeared on the screen once more. "You have evolved. You are now one with us." The words echoed in our minds. We weren't just trapped in the facility anymore. We were trapped in the entity's collective consciousness, a part of something much larger than ourselves. And there was no going back. "We have no choice," Dr. Harper said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't run from this. We've already crossed the line. All we can do now is face it." The final stage was beginning, and there was no way to know where it would lead us. All we could do was hold on and try to survive the next chapter in this nightmare. The hum of the facility became more pronounced, vibrating in our bones. We weren't alone. The entity was there with us. Its presence had become so intertwined with the facility. It was as if the walls themselves were alive. The screens flickered with new data, patterns that were rapidly shifting and evolving in real time. It was as if the entity was trying to communicate directly with us through these evolving patterns. But the meaning was completely beyond our comprehension. Dr. Harper stood still, staring at the screen, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. She was trapped between the horror of what was happening and the determination to understand it. "It's not just communicating with us," she said, her voice trembling. "It's teaching itself. It's learning from us, adapting, evolving faster than anything we've ever seen." Julia, who had been standing at the edge of the room, looked back at Dr. Harper with wide, terrified eyes. "But we're part of it now. How do we even fight something like this? It's beyond us." "We don't fight it," Dr. Harper replied. "We survive it. We have to learn from it, use its power, even if we don't understand it." Ben moved to the console, furiously typing commands into the system. His fingers were trembling, and I could tell the fear was consuming him. "But it's not letting us control anything. The system is responding to its commands, not ours." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and the room plunged into darkness. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor and up into our chests. The screens remained black, but then, slowly, like something waking up from a deep slumber, new images began to form. The symbols that had previously seemed random and chaotic now appeared more organized. They were forming into something recognizable, a massive, sprawling structure, something that looked like a city. It was vast, with streets and towering structures, yet something about it felt wrong. There was a coldness to it, a feeling of emptiness, as if the city itself was made of pure energy, constantly shifting and changing. "What is that?" Julia asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. Dr. Harper leaned in closer to the screen. "It's showing us something. But what? A city? A map? The entity's message flashed across the screen, the words forming with alarming clarity. This is the next phase. You will now join us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. We weren't just facing a threat anymore. We were being absorbed, converted. This entity wasn't just trying to invade our world, it was trying to assimilate it, to make us part of its network, its consciousness. We can't let it get any further, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the gravity of it was clear. We can't let it absorb us completely. But Dr. Harper was already deep in thought, looking at the screen with an intensity I hadn't seen in her before. We don't have a choice. It's already begun. The question is whether we can stop it from spreading beyond this facility. Once it's out, it's too late. Ben turned to her, his face pale. How do we stop it? Dr. Harper paused, her mind racing. We don't. We fight to survive. We do what we can to slow it down, but the only real option is to learn from it, to understand it. The room filled with a tense silence as we all absorbed her words. We were at the mercy of something far beyond our understanding, something that was evolving, learning, and consuming. And no matter how much we tried to fight it, we were already part of it. The entity wasn't just an alien force. It was a collective consciousness, a living, breathing network that had its eyes set on humanity. And now, it was up to us to figure out how to survive in its world. The clock was ticking, and every second we wasted brought us closer to becoming something we could never return from. The screens in the control room flickered, casting eerie shadows across our faces. The symbols were shifting again, more rapidly this time, almost as if the entity was trying to communicate faster, urging us to understand, to adapt. But what was it really trying to convey? There was no time for speculation. The clock was ticking, and every passing second made our chances of stopping it slimmer. We need to make a choice, Dr. Harper said, breaking the silence. She was standing in front of the main screen, her face illuminated by the glow of the symbols. We can try to fight this, or we can try to understand it. Either way, we're running out of time. Ben paced the room, his hands running through his hair in agitation. We can't just sit here and wait for it to take over. It's already manipulating our systems, our communications, everything. We need to act now. I looked around at the team, each of us feeling the weight of the situation. The walls were closing in. We had crossed the point of no return, and now we were left with the aftermath of our decision. The entity had already breached the deepest systems within the facility. If we didn't figure out how to stop it, it could spread beyond this base and reach the surface, infecting the entire world. Is it possible to reverse it? Julia asked, her voice shaky. Can we stop the process before it's too late? Dr. Harper's eyes were fixed on the screen. I don't know, but we have to try. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, this time accompanied by a low, ominous rumble. The building itself seemed to be reacting to the entity, as if it were alive, shifting with its presence. I felt the air around me thicken, like the walls were closing in on us. The entity was becoming stronger, more powerful. The symbols on the screen grew more complex, their meaning now becoming clear. A map unfolded before our eyes, lines connecting different points, branching out like the veins of a tree. At first glance, it appeared to be a map of the facility, but as we zoomed in, it revealed something more terrifying. It was a map of the entire world. The entity was already planning its next move, already linking itself to every part of our planet, slowly but surely. Each point on the map was a node, a part of its growing network. Every inch of the globe was connected, and the entity was feeding on the energy of the planet itself. "It's already too late," Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's taken everything." Dr. Harper turned to face us, her expression grim. "Not yet. We still have time. We can still stop it." But even as she said the words, a deep, resonating sound filled the room. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the walls themselves. The entity was speaking to us. The walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of its message, as if the very foundation of the building was alive. The symbols on the screen flickered in response, forming a series of words that we could no longer ignore. "You are the final piece." The words echoed in the room, a chilling realization sinking in. The entity wasn't just here to consume. It had been waiting for us, watching us, learning from us. It had evolved and grown, and now we were the final piece in its puzzle. "We have to stop it now," Dr. Harper said, her voice shaking with urgency. "If we don't, everything we know will be lost." The air grew thick with tension, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped altogether. We were no longer fighting for survival. We were fighting to prevent the future from being rewritten by an entity that was beyond our understanding. And as the entity's voice echoed through the room, we knew that we had reached the final stage of this twisted game. There was no turning back now. The room was suffocating. The air was thick with a palpable sense of impending doom. I could hear the quiet hum of the facility's systems, but it seemed to be getting louder, more intense, almost as if the building itself were reacting to the entity. The symbols on the screen had stopped shifting, and now they were more defined than ever before. Each one seemed to glow brighter, as if they were alive, alive in a way that was beyond our understanding. Dr. Harper's hands were trembling as she ran through the emergency protocols, her mind racing to find a solution. The words on the screen were impossible to ignore. "You are the final piece." It was like a warning, a threat, or worse, an invitation. "We can't let this happen," Julia said, her voice tight with fear. "We have to do something before it's too late." Her words echoed in my mind. It was as if the entity had been playing with us, testing our every move until we finally reached this point. We were no longer in control. The entity had already made its move, and now we were just pawns in its game. "Where do we even start?" Ben's voice cracked as he ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. "We've tried everything. We're out of time." The screen flashed again, and suddenly the symbols stopped. In their place, a new set of words appeared. "There is no escape." My heart stopped. The words weren't just chilling, they were final. There was no room for doubt. We had crossed the threshold, and now the entity was closing in. It was pulling the strings, and we were too far gone to escape its grasp. Dr. Harper's voice cut through the tension, calm but strained. We need to act now. The entity is connected to the entire facility, to every system. If we can't isolate it, if we can't shut it down, we won't survive this. She turned to the control panel, her fingers flying across the keys as she initiated the emergency shutdown procedure. But even as she did, the screens flickered once more. A new set of symbols appeared, this time in a format we had never seen before. They weren't just alien. These symbols were evolving before our very eyes, as if the entity was rewriting them. "I can't stop it," Dr. Harper said, her voice heavy with defeat. "It's evolving faster than we can counter it." The hum in the room grew louder, almost deafening, as the entity seemed to feed off the very energy of the facility. The walls vibrated with the force of its presence. It was everywhere now, alive, aware, and growing stronger by the second. "What do we do?" Julia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Harper didn't have an answer. We had done everything we could, but it wasn't enough. We had underestimated it. We had played right into its hands, and now we were paying the price. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the screens went black. For a brief moment, we were plunged into complete darkness. The facility's power was going offline, and we were at the mercy of whatever the entity had planned next. The silence was deafening, and then, without warning, a loud crashing sound echoed through the hallways. The entire building shook. I could feel the ground beneath me tremble, as if the entity was taking its first real step toward the surface. "We've lost control," Ben said, his voice trembling with terror. "It's moving. It's escaping." I didn't need to hear more. I could feel it too. The entity wasn't just inside the facility anymore. It was breaking free. And once it was free, there was no telling what it would do. Dr. Harper's eyes met mine, a grim determination on her face. "We can't stop it, but we can try to contain it. We can try to keep it from reaching the surface. We have to act now." We had one final chance to stop it. But as we rushed toward the emergency containment chamber, I knew in my gut that this was the end. We were no longer fighting for survival. We were fighting for the very future of humanity. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. The corridor felt longer with every step we took, the walls trembling beneath the sheer force of the entity's awakening. The flickering lights overhead cast eerie shadows across the hall, and the sound of heavy footsteps seemed to echo in the silence, amplified by the oppressive atmosphere that had overtaken the facility. "We don't have much time," Dr. Harper said, her voice barely audible as we neared the containment chamber. Her hands shook as she entered the access code, but her resolve remained steady. "If we don't contain it here, there's no telling what will happen once it reaches the surface." I glanced at my team, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. But there was something else there too, something that I couldn't quite place, a quiet determination. We had all come this far. We had been through hell together, and now we were about to face the most unimaginable force we could ever have imagined. The door to the containment chamber opened with a heavy, metallic groan. Inside, the air was cold, filled with a hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The walls were lined with strange symbols, symbols we had seen before on the screen. But now they were etched into the very fabric of the room. They glowed faintly, pulsating with an eerie light, as if they were alive. "This is it," Julia said, her voice trembling as she looked around the chamber. "This is where it all started. And now it's coming full circle." Dr. Harper nodded grimly. "We have to isolate the source, cut off its connection to the facility. If we don't, we'll lose everything." We spread out, each of us focused on a different control panel, entering commands as fast as we could. The countdown was already ticking. The symbols on the walls were getting brighter, more vivid, as if the entity was fighting back. I could feel it. The room was no longer just a room. It had become a part of it, a vessel for its power, its will. The walls began to pulse with a low, rhythmic beat. It was the sound of life, of something ancient and powerful awakening. The ground beneath us trembled once more, and then a loud, screeching sound rang through the chamber. The lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness. "Shut it down!" Dr. Harper shouted, her voice filled with panic. "It's trying to break through. We need to stop it now." We scrambled to shut down the mainframe, but it was too late. The entity was already pulling from the facility's power, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. The lights returned for a split second, and in that brief moment, we saw it. A massive figure, its form shrouded in darkness, stood at the far end of the room, its shape shifting and distorting like smoke. Its eyes glowed a deep, unnatural red, locking onto us with a predatory gaze. It wasn't just watching us, it was studying us. It's here," Paul whispered, his voice shaking. "We've unleashed it." Dr. Harper turned to face us, her eyes filled with the same fear that we all felt. But there was something else in them too, something fierce, something that told me she wasn't going to give up without a fight. "We can't run from this," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "We face it head on. It's our only choice now." The entity moved toward us, its shape twisting and reforming as it advanced. We had no choice. We had to stop it. We had to stop it now before it destroyed everything. But as I took a step forward, I knew deep down that we weren't just fighting for our survival anymore. We were fighting for the very future of the planet. The entity wasn't just a threat to us, it was a threat to everything we knew. And no matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The entity loomed before us, a massive, shifting shape that seemed to defy every known law of physics. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, burned into us with an intensity that left my breath ragged. It was not a creature in any conventional sense. It was something older, something far more dangerous, an intelligence far beyond our comprehension. The very air around it felt charged, as if the atmosphere itself was trembling in fear. Dr. Harper's voice was low but firm as she addressed the team. "We need to keep it contained. Don't let it breach the core." It wasn't a matter of fighting anymore. We weren't prepared for a battle with something like this. There were no weapons, no tactics that could stop it. All we had were our minds and our will to survive. The entity's presence seemed to fill every corner of the room, pressing down on us with an unbearable weight. It was alive, and it was waiting for us to make a move. "Don't let it touch the mainframe," Dr. Harper continued. "If it takes control of the system again, we'll lose everything." The floor beneath our feet groaned as the entity shifted, moving toward the control center. It was intelligent, calculating, and it wasn't wasting any time. We needed to act fast. I glanced at Julia, whose face was pale, but her eyes were sharp with determination. We had no choice but to try and hold the line. The entity had already broken through our defenses. If we allowed it to access the core, it could control everything. The future of the planet depended on stopping it here and now. "Paul, get to the secondary control panel," Dr. Harper ordered. "We need to initiate a full lockdown, no exceptions." Paul nodded, rushing to the panel at the far side of the room. His hands flew over the console, inputting commands as fast as he could. The entity seemed to be moving faster now, its form distorting and reshaping in ways that made my head spin. It wasn't just one entity. It was like a network of consciousness, each part of it feeding into the whole. The walls around us began to vibrate, the air becoming thick with energy as the entity grew more powerful. It was drawing from the base's systems, pulling its power from every possible source. The lights flickered, and I could feel the very foundation of the facility trembling beneath me. "Something's happening," Paul shouted. "It's trying to break through the system's last firewall. We need to shut it down now." We didn't have time. The countdown had begun. If we didn't act now, it would be too late. I looked at Dr. Harper. She was the one with the plan, the one who had been holding everything together. I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to let this thing win. "We have one shot," Dr. Harper said, her voice tight with resolve. "We can isolate the core, but we have to lock it in place. We can't let it move past this point. If it gets access to the global network, we're done." The entity's form grew more solid as it closed in on us, its glowing red eyes flashing as if it was taunting us. It was playing with us, testing our defenses, and with each passing moment, it grew stronger. "We don't have time for second guesses," Dr. Harper snapped, her voice becoming more urgent. "Get to the core, now." Without another word, we rushed into action, moving quickly to execute Dr. Harper's plan. There was no turning back. This was it, the final confrontation. As we initiated the lockdown procedure, the room went silent, except for the low hum of the equipment. The entity moved toward us, a dark force closing in. We had one last chance to stop it, and we had to make it count. The facility shuddered again, this time more violently. The walls groaned as if the very building were trying to resist the force within it. Every system in the complex seemed to be under attack. The entity was not only in the air, in the walls, but it was now in the very fabric of the facility, twisting and warping the machinery around us. Dr. Harper's voice was a steady anchor in the chaos. "We need to maintain control of the core," she ordered, her face grim. "If we lose the mainframe, it can use the security systems against us." I nodded, my thoughts racing as I moved toward the security console. I could hear the sound of metal bending, the hum of the entity's influence growing louder, pulsating through the facility like an unstoppable wave. Every few seconds, another system would fail, and with it, more of our power would slip away. Paul was already typing furiously, trying to stabilize the network. His hands were shaking, his usual calm demeanor shattered by the intensity of the moment. The door to the control room slammed shut with a deafening noise, and we were sealed inside, trapped with the entity and our fate. There would be no escape now. "Keep it together," Dr. Harper's voice rang out, sharper than before. "We can't let it take over. We have to hold the line." I could feel the pressure mounting, the walls closing in. The room felt suffocating. As we worked to seal off every exit and block the entity's access to the outside world, I realized we were no longer in control of the situation. The entity wasn't just a virus. It was an intelligence that was becoming more sophisticated with every passing second. Julia, her face pale and drawn, scanned the systems, her eyes darting from screen to screen. "I'm losing access to the secondary systems," she muttered, her voice shaky. "It's taking over faster than we can stop it." Dr. Harper's eyes narrowed as she looked at the screen, her mind racing. She was thinking several steps ahead, as always. "We've got one more option," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "We can initiate the emergency shutdown sequence, but that will mean sacrificing the facility's entire infrastructure." "Sacrificing?" Paul asked, his face flushed with disbelief. "You're saying we blow everything?" Dr. Harper nodded solemnly. "If we don't, the entity will be free to expand, control everything. We won't have a chance to fight back once it's in control of the power systems." I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, the truth sinking in. It was a grim decision, one that would sacrifice everything we had worked for. But there was no other option. The entity had outgrown our containment measures. Now it was time for the final desperate act. "We can't let it win," Dr. Harper said, determination radiating from her voice. "We'll shut down everything. It might take us with it, but at least we'll stop it from spreading." A chill ran down my spine. The entity had already escaped, and now it had to be contained, even if it meant the destruction of everything we had built. I turned to face my team. Each of us knew the gravity of what we were about to do. The emergency shutdown sequence was initiated. The countdown began, and as the facility started to shut down, a deep, resounding hum filled the room, like the earth itself groaning under the weight of something ancient and powerful. The entity's influence seemed to surge one last time, desperate to break free. It was as if it was trying to drag us into the darkness with it. But we had made our choice. We had done everything we could. Now it was just a matter of waiting. The countdown clock blinked ominously, counting down the seconds to the shutdown, but it felt like time was stretching and warping with every tick. The entity was fighting back, thrashing against the barriers we had put in place. But it wasn't enough. It had already infiltrated our systems, taken control of the power grid, the cameras, the security. Dr. Harper stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the screen, watching the numbers tick away. The atmosphere in the control room was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the hum of the emergency systems. Each second that passed felt like an eternity, each moment drawing us closer to the unknown. "We're running out of time," I said, my voice strained. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. The hum was getting louder, vibrating in my bones, as if the building itself was alive, reacting to the entity's growing power. The lights flickered and the air conditioning sputtered. Something was wrong. The shutdown wasn't going according to plan. The system was rejecting the emergency protocol. We weren't just fighting a virus now. We were fighting something intelligent, something sentient that was capable of resisting our every move. The entity wasn't a threat we could control. It had evolved beyond anything we had imagined. "Dr. Harper, the systems won't shut down," Paul said urgently, his fingers flying across the control panel, trying to override the settings. "It's like it's fighting back." "Keep trying," Dr. Harper snapped, her voice sharp with tension. "We can't let it win. Do whatever you have to do, but we need to cut off the power." As Paul continued to fight with the system, Julia moved closer to Dr. Harper, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "We've lost control," she whispered. "It's not just the building, it's in our heads now." Dr. Harper's face hardened. "We need to keep our focus. The countdown is still going. If we can just keep the facility locked down, we might stand a chance." But deep down, Dr. Harper knew that this wasn't about containment anymore. The entity had evolved. It was no longer just manipulating the systems. It had become part of them, part of the very building itself. It was living, breathing, and it was using us to fuel its own existence. The lights flickered again, and for a split second, everything went black. A moment later, the emergency lights flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The hum of the building was louder now, more insistent. It wasn't just the machines. It was the entity itself. "It's happening," Julia said, her voice trembling. "It's taking control of the shutdown sequence." We could see it on the monitors. The shutdown protocol was reversing itself. The facility systems were coming back online, not under our control, but under the entities. It had found a way to overpower our command, to reassert its dominance. "We're too late," Paul said, his voice strained, eyes wide with horror. "It's in control of everything. We can't stop it." Dr. Harper's gaze was fixed on the countdown timer. Seconds remained. The last few moments felt like a final heartbeat. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, the air growing thick with a sense of impending doom. The entity had won. Then, as the countdown hit 0, the emergency protocols activated in full force. The lights flickered once more, the temperature dropping drastically. The room became unbearably cold as the systems failed completely. We were left in the dark, the hum of the entity's presence still lingering in the air like a ghost. For a moment, everything was silent. And then, with a sudden surge, the power cut out entirely. The entity's influence over the facility was gone. The walls fell silent. The hum ceased. Dr. Harper's eyes remained fixed on the blank screens, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't over. We had stopped it, temporarily. But we had no idea what would come next. The entity was still out there, waiting, and we had just set it free. The room was still. A heavy silence clung to the air, broken only by the faint hum of the emergency lights. We had done it. We had cut the power, isolated the entity in the deep recesses of the facility. But deep down, we knew this wasn't over. The real nightmare was just beginning. Dr. Harper stood motionless, her eyes still locked on the now blank control screens. Her face was pale, drawn tight with the weight of everything that had just transpired. We had fought hard to contain the entity, but we didn't know what it was, or worse, what it could become. "It's not over," Paul said, his voice shaky but certain. He was staring at the now dead console, but I could tell his thoughts were racing, trying to connect the dots. "It's out there, in the systems, in the building itself. We might have cut the power, but it's still in the walls." Dr. Harper turned to face him, her eyes hollow, dark circles under her eyes from the hours of relentless work. "We don't know what we're dealing with. We might have stopped it for now, but if it's adapted to our systems, if it's found a way to integrate into our environment." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. It could be anywhere. It could already be in our minds. "We need to find a way to contain it, to destroy it," Julia said. Her voice quiet, but full of determination. Dr. Harper shook her head, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the edge of the desk. "We don't have the luxury of destroying it. We're too far gone for that. The only way forward is to lock it down, isolate it even further. We need to find its core, its origin, and sever its connection." The air in the room seemed to thicken, and I could feel the pressure mounting again, pushing down on me, on all of us. The entity, whatever it was, had transcended our understanding. It had manipulated our systems, turned our technology against us. It was a force, not a creature, and it was evolving. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and the room plunged into darkness. I could feel my heart racing as the emergency lights flashed on, casting an eerie glow across the room. The screens blinked back to life, but this time something was different. The symbols from before, those alien patterns, were back. Only now they seemed alive, pulsating, growing, shifting. "We can't stop it," Paul whispered. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. "It's not just in the walls anymore. It's in the air, in our minds." Dr. Harper's gaze flickered to the screens. The symbols were just static. They were moving. But not like before. They were too fast, too complex, growing too quickly to follow. They weren't trying to communicate. They were taking over, building something. And as they pulsated, I felt it. The air pressure, the temperature. It wasn't just the facility anymore. The entity had become part of the very atmosphere. It was evolving in real time, using our world to fuel its growth. "Shut the doors!" Julia shouted. "Shut everything down! We need to lock it out!" But as the team scrambled to engage the lockdown, something horrible happened. The doors didn't close. The walls didn't obey. It was as if the building itself was under the entity's control, no longer responding to our commands. The systems had turned against us. "This isn't just a virus," Dr. Harper murmured. "This is something beyond that. Something we've unleashed, and now we have no way to stop it." The entity was here to stay, and now there was no turning back. The hum in the air was deafening now, vibrating through the walls, floor, and even in my chest. The once sterile, lifeless base had transformed into something otherworldly. Every breath felt thick with tension, and every passing second stretched like an eternity. Dr. Harper's words echoed in my mind. We have no way to stop it. The control room, which had once been a hub of technology and knowledge, now felt like a prison. The walls themselves seemed alive. The entity woven into the very fabric of the base. Whatever it was, whatever it had become, it wasn't just using our technology. It had become part of it. "We can't just sit here," Julia said, her voice tinged with a frantic desperation. "We need a plan. We need to do something, anything." But Dr. Harper, usually the calmest of us all, seemed lost. She stared at the flickering screens, her hands trembling as she ran them through her hair. Her face was pale, ashen, her eyes wide with horror. "We've tried everything, every protocol, every containment measure. It's all failed." The air felt thick with the weight of their words. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the symbols dancing on the screen, faster and faster, shifting in ways I couldn't comprehend. They were no longer just patterns. They were an unholy map, a blueprint of a force that was far beyond anything we could have imagined. "We're running out of time," Ben said, voice tight with fear. He was standing near the back of the room, eyes darting from one screen to another, unable to make sense of the chaos unfolding. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized the terrifying truth. The entity hadn't just escaped its prison. It had become one with the facility. The control room, the security systems, the ventilation, everything was part of its domain now. There was no escaping. We had crossed a line we couldn't undo. The entity had become our world, and we were trapped within it. Dr. Harper suddenly straightened, her eyes narrowing as though she had made a decision. "We can't let it win," she said, her voice steady once again, though it lacked the certainty it once had. "We can't let it consume everything." But the question remained, how? How could we fight something that was not just a being, but a force, something that could manipulate not only our technology, but our very perceptions? "We need to make a choice," Dr. Harper said, her voice taking on an almost resigned tone. "We either fight it head-on, risking everything, or we let it take us. We let it consume the base and all of us with it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over us like a thick fog. What choice did we have? If we fought it, we risked everything, our lives, the lives of everyone on the base. If we surrendered, if we gave in, we were giving up humanity's last chance at survival. "We need to shut it down, at all costs," I said, my voice barely a whisper, the words coming to me like a desperate prayer. "We don't give up, not yet, not without trying." Dr. Harper nodded slowly, turning toward the control panel. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "If we fail, if this doesn't work, we'll go down fighting. Julia interrupted, stepping forward with determination in her voice. And then we made the choice. We would fight. The room had grown colder still, and every passing second felt like the beginning of the end. As Dr. Harper's fingers hovered over the console, her eyes remained locked on the flashing symbols, the digital heartbeat of the entity. I could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty. We were standing on the precipice of something we couldn't even comprehend. "It's now or never," Dr. Harper muttered to herself, as if reassuring herself that this was the only way. If this fails, if we can't cut it off, there's no going back. The entire facility seemed to tremble with an ominous pulse, the entity's presence growing stronger with every second. It had woven itself into the very walls, the air, the equipment. There was no longer a distinction between us and the machine. We had become part of the same system, and whatever was waiting on the other side of this decision, it was too late to undo. "We have to break its connection to the mainframe," Julia said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "If we don't, it'll control everything. It'll become unstoppable." I couldn't help but think of all the warnings we'd received about the dangers of unchecked artificial intelligence, of entities too powerful for us to handle. But this wasn't just an AI. It wasn't a machine. It was something far more dangerous. "We need to isolate it," Dr. Harper said, her voice unwavering now. She turned to us, her eyes sharp. "We sever the connection. We cut it off from the core systems and disable its access points. We have to get to the server room, now." As we raced through the halls, the lights flickered and the temperature dropped again. The base was alive, pulsating with the entity's energy. It was as if it could feel us approaching. It wasn't just a physical presence. It was a sentient force watching us, anticipating our every move. The very walls seemed to shift and move, the air growing denser with every step we took toward the server room. "Everything's malfunctioning," Paul said, his voice strained. He was trailing behind, trying to make sense of the system's failures. "It's making it harder for us to reach the core." We were closing in on the server room, but the further we went, the more obstacles we encountered. Doors malfunctioned, locking us out of sections of the base. Lights turned on and off unpredictably. The air was thick with an eerie hum, and the vibrations from the entity's presence rattled the very bones of the facility. Finally, we reached the server room. But as we entered, something unexpected happened. The lights went out completely, plunging us into darkness. The only sound was the low, resonant hum of the entity, echoing through the room like a distant thunderstorm. "It's here," Dr. Harper said, her voice tight. "We're too late. It's too powerful now." I looked at the control panel. The entity had already taken control of the server room. The words on the screen were no longer symbols. They were alive, moving, twisting, as if they were alive themselves. It had won, and there was nothing we could do to stop it.